Thanks to all of you for coming. The People's Biennial is a project, it's an idea that Harold and I developed probably about a year and a half ago. We both met on the occasion of an exhibition in San Francisco called Amateurs that the previous director of the Waters Institute was curating. And I had been in touch with ICI, this organization that Renaud is representing, which organizes traveling exhibitions throughout the United States. And it's sort of like a kind of mail order exhibition situation. I mean, what they do is basically they invite guest curators to come up with ideas for exhibitions, and you as an institution can get in touch and have those shows tour to your place. And they approached me a while ago if I had an idea for an exhibition. And when I met Harold, we were talking about our different interests, and that somehow we both were interested really in the exhibition as a medium, and him maybe a little bit more from the side of an artist and me from the side of the curator, but there were sort of lots of parallels of how we were thinking about exhibitions. And we came up with this project really kind of a sort of mutual interest in like looking at artists who are outside, working outside the mainstream. And I think in my case it has a lot to do with like also maybe a certain fatigue of seeing the same type of artworks over and over again, especially when you live and work in art centers like Berlin or London or New York. And I always found it refreshing when I would go to other places that maybe were not that much of an art hub to see different approaches and different styles. And I think to a certain extent it also had to do with me coming from Europe, from London, moving to the United States, and being familiar perhaps with like 5, 6 different cities in the US, having gone to New York, having lived there, having lived in Los Angeles, maybe a couple of times to Chicago. That was really like most of what I knew about the United States. So I guess part of the People's Biennial for me was also taking the opportunity to explore parts of this country that I didn't know at all and see what goes on there in terms of the artistic production. So the way this whole project works is that Harold and I are visiting these 5 cities that you see there on the screen. And in each city we are conducting a series of studio visits. We're meeting with local artists, and out of what we see during our research trips, we select a number of artists between like 5 and 10 from each city. And all of those artists will come together in one exhibition that then will tour to these 5 different cities. And in each city we have a collaborating institution, such as CK here, that works with us and organizes a lot of the logistics, introduces us to the artists, helps us with the research. The title I wanted to talk maybe a little bit about, the People's Biennial. We sort of like really were thinking about I was thinking about like a book that I just read recently, which is called The People's History of the United States, which sort of like would show you elements of America's history that maybe were not that well known, or that were overlooked, or maybe not so much talked about. And that's sort of like what I felt our project was about, going to places that people might not consider art centers and finding artists that are maybe working in different ways that sit outside the sort of aesthetics and looks and styles of what you would find in like galleries in Los Angeles or New York. So I think that's sort of like a quick overview of what the People's Biennial is about and what we're trying to do. And if you have any questions, let us know. That's maybe a good moment to talk a little bit about the overall idea of the People's Biennial. Because I think now what we're going to do is each of us going to present like 3 projects that we have previously curated to give you an idea of our work and what we are doing, and maybe also for you to see sort of how our 2 practices, one as an artist, one as a curator, is actually quite close in their ideas and ideologies. You want to add something?
No, I think you did a great job there, Jens. I appreciate that. Shall we? Any questions at this point? This is the thing. It's because of the way that ICI works. The show is sort of made available, and normally it would be a show that was already finished. That would be a curated show, and it would be of maybe an artist, a single artist's work, or a thematic show. and then venues around the country can order it basically, knowing exactly what they're going to get. They'd have a checklist and they'd know which work was going to go into it. But in our case, what we did was we're still working with that same system, but instead of having a checklist of work and knowing exactly what the show is going to be, we instead sort of proposed a concept that required a process. And so that information was made available along with these other shows that ICI was organizing, and then the venues actually picked us. So we didn't say like, okay, we have to go to this place and this place. We did want to have a kind of geographical spread across the country, and so we were trying to encourage finding places that were diversely spread out across the country. And so I think we've gotten a pretty good mix in that way. But really, it happened through the interest of the venues. And
well, I have to say that there were more venues interested than we have selected in the end. So if there was like another venue here in the southeast, we had to make a decision which one we wanted to take. But it was what Harold said was important, that we would have a sort of a place in the center, in the east, in the west, in the south, and in the north, to really sort of spread it out geographically. And actually been a really, really interesting process to go to these places. I mean, I don't know if any one of you has been to Rapid City ever before, but that was an extremely interesting, that was our last trip, extremely interesting trip. Wonderful art that we saw there, actually. It's kind of where Mount Rushmore is.
So okay, so I think unless there's another question, and feel free to just, it's a small group and we can do this casually. So as questions come to you, feel free to let us know and we'll try to answer them. But otherwise, we'll just sort of launch into reviewing these past projects that we've each done, and we're just going to alternate between the projects. So the first one is a project that Jens has done.
Oh yeah, okay. So this is a project that I organized in Los Angeles in a venue that is called Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions. It's a gallery that has existed probably for like about 40 years now, started like in the late 60s, early 70s. And this was, I think, maybe like 7-8 years ago. I lived in Los Angeles for a while and I met the director of the space, and she asked me if I wanted to do a project there. And they have a very small budget, so I kind of had to think about how do I make an exhibition with very limited funds that still sort of like somehow is meaningful and can really fill not only the gallery space but also provide some form of thought process, some interesting ideas. And of course, as a European or someone who grew up most of his life in Europe, Los Angeles had always this sort of like this strangeness about it that you couldn't walk in Los Angeles. It's always like all about driving. At least this is what you think when you come from abroad. So I came up with this project where I invited 12 artists that are kind of like essentially really known as being Los Angeles artists to come up with walks that they would do through certain neighborhoods of the city. And these walks were that were sort of like through parts of town that were important for them. Either they grew up there, they lived there for some part, or there was some other relationship to them personally or the work that they were doing. And in the gallery space, we had these maps that you could see here with these red lines that would like show you the way the walk was going. And this is pretty much how these maps were put up there. The colors, they were coming from the emblem of Los Angeles County. So we used like the blue and the green and the gold to sort of like, again, refer to Los Angeles. Here's another map, Mac Cranston's walk. I think this is Eric Wesley. And as one of the, as a next step,